All right, so good morning, and thanks for attending this presentation on Buildship. Most of you probably saw it already during the keys note, a short introduction to Buildship 1.0. And during this presentation, I'd like to go more into details and basically show you everything we did to more extent. But first, before we go into the real demo, what is our vision for IDE integration? And it's basically two things. We want to make, in this case, Eclipse more powerful by allowing the user to do more things from within the IDE. Right, so we don't want him to go to the command line for anything. And we want to have a single truth of logic when it comes to build logic. Right? So everything that your build is basically your master of your build logic, and there should not be any duplication in your IDE setup that can deviate from it. And the Android Studio is a great example of that vision, and we're trying to do the same now with Eclipse as well. So with that said, I would like to go right into the demo and show you all the details of what we did, and then also finish with what's coming up next. Because what we have right now is the basics. It's the Gradle user. He can interact with the build, but there's much more we want to do. And now we're going to get to the cool stuff. Right. All right, so let me go into Eclipse. And I'll start over with it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, and now that I just did the same thing during the keynote, but I think we'll get over it. OK, so I can do an import. I can go, of course, I can go to the menu. I can write Gradle and filter. I can also write Buildship, so we have different keywords that will match. If you don't remember, that is Gradle. You remember it's Buildship. We give you some hints here on how to best make use of Buildship as well as Gradle. What should you use for advanced options? Should you use the Gradle wrapper or not, etc. Okay, because I mean, who reads the online help here? I would guess nobody. But you can click it away and it never appears again. Then, as I showed you before, you import a project. So you basically select your root project that you want to import, and that's it. You can also add it to working sets. So here we have the typical Eclipse working set widget, where you can say, OK, the project that I import should become part of Eclipse working sets. You can create new ones, etc. That's all taken from what's there already in Eclipse. And if you selected working sets already in your IDE, by the time you start the import, it will be pre-populated with these working sets. So trying to give you the best Eclipse user experience that you already know of from other import wizards, etc. Then on the advanced options, you can choose the Gradle distribution. We highly recommend you use the Gradle wrapper, make it part of your project, it's versioned. There's really not many reasons not to use the wrapper, or I don't know of any. But sometimes it can be interesting to play around with. Let's say your project uses the Gradle uses Gradle 2.4 defined in the Gradle wrapper, but you want to use the latest 2.5 snapshot just to see how it goes. Well, then it's very easy. You just go here and you specify the version you want to use. We populate this with all the released versions. We also add the latest RC candidate. Yeah. But you can also write your own version in here if you wanted to, whatever it is. Right. OK, but I'm going to use the Gradle wrapper for this example. You could, if you wanted to, use a different Gradle user home directory, different Java home directory, different JVM options, and different program arguments. Nothing you typically do. And again, whatever you do here is not part of the build. So the next developer that imports the project will not have these settings, right? So you really want to stay away from relying that users do these things. But again, if you want to, you can. Then we come to the preview page, and you saw that there was some progress bar there. So while we load the preview, we talk to Gradle in a very lightweight way. So it's a communication that doesn't require the whole build, the whole model being instantiated, but it just basically gets the Gradle, the build structure, and some information about the version and other environment settings in general. So what you can see here is we said we're using the Gradle wrapper, We didn't specify which version, but since we talked to Gradle, we now know which version is actually going to be used. Right. Okay. And we see what Java home directory is used. We didn't specify any, so Gradle tells us which one is it going to use. So you have a bit more context what's going to happen once you start the import. And this can be useful, especially when things go wrong. It's good to know about that. By the way, all these things that you do here is validated. So if you use some local installation directory that doesn't exist, we complain about it. And everything you enter, you select, we persist. So next time you start the wizard, you get the same values again. Okay. So we could now do the import, and everything's fine. But I wanted to show you something first. So what happens sometimes, I'm in this in a build that I'm going to import in a build script of this build. I'm going to add something that's not valid. Okay. And let's say we now do an import. We do a preview. We get some error message. So we invested some time in trying to make these error messages as consolidated as possible. So instead of you having to go to the error log or you having to go through the stack trace, you don't have to. We're trying to give you more information. So the preview failed. It couldn't get that model. It says this tooling comments build Gradle 23. Something was wrong. It even tells you what was wrong. It couldn't find the property called foo. Right. So it gives you some convenience about figuring out what went wrong. And we try to do this in every place to give you more specific information. If you wanted to, you could still go through the stack trace yourself and have fun in here. You find the same information. So there's no magic involved. Just trying to make it as convenient for you as possible. Okay. So let me go back and revert that change. We're not, and we refresh, and everything's fine again. Now let's say our Buildship supports all versions as of Gradle 1.0. So you can import a project that's written with Gradle 1.0, which was written in prehistoric times. So let's simulate that. I'm going to import this project. I say I want to use 2.0. Now, even though Gradle or Buildship supports importing projects and working with projects as of Gradle 1.0, you will not have all functionality, because Gradle 1.0 will not provide you all the information that Buildship needs in order to give you all the features. And so we displayed you that information with a little warning icon. So you can click here, and it will show you, oh, you're using 2.0. Well, what are the things you're not going to have? You're not going to have cancellation support, because that was introduced in 2.1. You're not going to have test progress visualization. That came in 2.4. And you're not going to have build task progress visualization, because that came in 2.5, or comes in 2.5. Right. So of course, we try to encourage you to upgrade. That's part of the reason, but also to show you, okay, you're using an older version. These are the limitations. Rather than reporting a bug saying, I don't see the test progress, I'm using Gradle 1.0. Because we cannot fix old versions, right? 1.0 is out. There's no way to fix it. Okay, but let's use the latest version. I'm just going to use the wrapper, which uses the latest snapshot to do the import, and we will do that. So if I finish now, it does the import. It starts a job. That job can be canceled. Well, it's a small import, so it doesn't take that long. But it's a job. I can cancel it. And by canceling it, it doesn't just disappear. The job doesn't just disappear, but the actual build, or the actual Gradle build, is canceled, right? Assuming I'm using version 2.1 or newer. Right? And as I mentioned before, I can do this with every operation that involves Gradle. We will have a stop button, and that tells Gradle, stop what you're doing, and you can continue to work. If you don't have this and you have a big project, you might be importing for 30 minutes and you have to kind of shut down or kill Eclipse in order to start a new import or something like that. So we have cancellation support, and you can benefit from it. The projects are set up based on the information that came from the Gradle build. So we have these Eclipse project models, and based on that, we set them up. Some are configured as Java projects. If we can identify it's a Java project, we will add the Java nature. We'll set up the build class path. If we detect, well, it's not a Java project, we basically leave it as it is. Right? It becomes a project, and we will see the tasks, but it doesn't have the Java nature. So you can imagine the future, there could be a Scala nature that we add if we detected Scala or Groovy, etc. Right now we do it for Java. And Groovy is included as well because it's considered a subtype of a Java project. Right? So you can see tooling comments, the root project, it's not a Java project. Right? There's no build path for it. Okay. So let's look a little bit more again on the build path. You can open that, say configure. So we get from the model all the sources, and Eclipse, different to IDEA, does not support different source sets within a single project. So if you have productive sources and you have test sources, typically what I've seen is people have two projects, one with the production sources and one with the test sources. And in my opinion, that's a workaround for not having one project saying these are my tests and these are my productive sources, right? And even though Gradle knows the concept of different source sets, we cannot overcome these limitations in Eclipse. So we just stuff it in one project. But of course, if you have two different projects, one for production and one for test sources, you will get two projects in Eclipse as well. But we cannot map source sets here. Or yeah.
So, question: the source sets are one thing, but also the dependencies, test dependencies versus compile dependencies.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So the different configurations, like compile configuration, or test configuration, which is a compile test, which is an extension of the compile one, which inherits all the dependencies. No, we can't do that in Eclipse, so we can't do that neither.
Sorry, can you repeat the question for video?
In Gradle, you can define different configurations, but we cannot map these configurations to different things in Eclipse because these differences, we cannot model this in Eclipse, but we can model it in Gradle. So there's a bit of a mismatch. So we get the sources included here, and we have this class path container. So the concept of a class path container in Eclipse is that we don't directly on the project store all the dependencies, but we just kind of store a placeholder. And that placeholder gets populated the moment the project is opened. Right. And that's exactly what we do. So if we create this project, we close Eclipse, or we close the project, we open it again, it will see, oh, there's a placeholder, let me populate the class path container for this project. And that's what we do then in the background. And we do a lot of caching in Buildship, so that's what tooling commons, that layer does, among other things. So we try to only get the model once and not get it again, unless it's really needed and we need to force a reload. Yes?
Question, do you all separate out the source and the test so they can go to different build output directories, but they all just go to the same output directory?
The question is if the different sources can write to different output directories. No, we write them to the same output directory.
So along that line, if I want to run tests, I could right-click from like the Explorer type view, Project Explorer view, and do run as JUnit, or I could right-click and execute a Gradle test task. So I would assume that if I do the run a Gradle test task, I would be using the test configuration that's defined in Gradle. Is that true?
Yes.
But if I'm using, if I'm trying to right-click and just run as JUnit, then I'm really using this combined class path. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, they should be the same or very close. But you're basically coming to a feature that will be available in Gradle 2.6, which is running tests through the Gradle API or the Gradle tooling API. And you can tell it, run this test in Gradle. We're working on this right now. Okay, so I'll come back to this feature when I talk about what's coming next. Right, but you're right, yes. And in the end, everything basically should transparently go through Gradle. Right? So if you say right-click, run this test, the user just runs this test like usual, but it should be Gradle executing the test, giving you the progress, giving you the output. And so we're getting there. So this class path container, as I mentioned, is a placeholder. It's populated as the project is opened. which also makes it possible to check in certain configurations files. Some projects do that, and there's a placeholder. It never changes, but the actual dependencies might change, but it doesn't change the committed files of the configuration. What we just did in 2.5 is that this ClassPath container is set up such that it doesn't re-export its dependencies. And because that led to many issues. From various projects, we got feedback, no, please don't do this. So let's say you have two projects. One uses Guava 15, the other one uses Guava 16. Depending on the order, you have a conflict. You're using the wrong version. I could explain this in more detail, but it always turns out, well, keep all the dependencies to a single project. Don't export them, but instead have the transitive dependencies included in that project. So tooling model could have Guava 16, tooling client could have Guava 15. They don't see each other's transitive dependencies. And if they do transitively depend on each other, there will be conflict resolution, making sure it's using the right version. Right. Same is true for project dependencies. Right. Okay. So what you see here is not really what you would see if you looked at your Gradle project on the command line. It's not like tooling model depends on all these projects directly. There are transitive dependencies, but here there are kind of, there's a transitive closure around all of them, right? Which works the best in Eclipse. And we did the same for IDEA. So if you set up your project in IDEA, you get the same thing. If you set up your Eclipse project through the command line to generate you the configuration files, you get the same setup as well. Okay, so this is done consistently across all ways you can generate IDE project setup. One thing which we just added is, well, let's say we add a new dependencies. We don't want to re-import the whole project. You can right-click. I think it's too new. It's not even here. Yeah, you can right-click. You can say Gradle, and you can say refresh projects, and it will refresh the class path of these projects. Right. Okay. So from my perspective, this concludes what I wanted to show about the import. Right.
Can you show us the actual file?
The actual what?
Can you show us the file that generated?
So here you see, oops. Here you see this class path container. This is this one placeholder here. So the question was, can I show the classpath file? Here you have a single entry, that's the classpath container, and that is populated once the project is opened. What you also see is that the source files, they're not part of the classpath container, they are here added explicitly, and we also remember if it was a project, a directory that came from Gradle or not. So if you added your own source sets and you do a refresh, we would not just throw it away because it's not coming from our model. We know where it came from. Right, so trying to be a bit smart. All right, so this is the typical way you import an existing project, because most people are not build masters. They don't create their own projects. They import an existing project. But on high demand, we implemented also a new wizard. So you can say, I want to create a new Gradle project. I'm just going to use the shortcut. I can say new Gradle. And all I have to do is I have to say, well, what's the name of my project? And I'm basically done. I can say finish. It's like with the import. Root directory, and you're done. If you want to, you can say where you want to store it. You want to store it by default in the workspace. You want to add it to some working sets. And that's basically it. Right. Of course, we do, as usual, we do all this validation. If it's not valid, we complain, etc. Okay. Again, we see a preview. So once you define basically the project name and where it is, we create that project and we show you the preview. And if you say, yes, that's fine, we will actually add it to the workspace. Same screen like you saw before. Say finish, and now we have our little project. What we do is we call Gradle init with the right archetype, even though it's kind of limited right now, how you can configure it and what happens. We delegate again to Gradle because Buildship shouldn't have any Gradle logic, or as little as possible. So we basically, you could do the same on the command line, say Gradle init, import, etc. But we don't want you to leave Eclipse. We just want you to do this right directly from the IDE. Okay, and then we have a full setup. It's a single project build, but you have settings file, you have the wrapper in there, yeah. And could be a way to start working with Gradle. What will come soon is a conversion wizard, which allows you to say, oh, I have my Java project, it's not using Gradle yet, please convert it to a Gradle project. Yeah. Of course, it's limited to how much you can do, but it will be convenient for many simple projects. Okay. Yes. So next is the task view. As I mentioned before, no, sorry, there's one more thing I should mention about the import. Some projects have a Gradle project where not everything is a Java project. They might even have WT projects in there or other projects, and they don't want them to be touched by your import. So what we do is if we see a settings file in a Gradle project that should be imported, we don't touch it, except that we add the Gradle nature, which means whatever you configured for that project and you checked in these settings so other developers can check it out, we will just leave it as it is. Except adding the Gradle nature, which means you will see the project and its tasks. Right? But other than that, you can configure it whatever you want to. And so, for example, the Xtext project, they had exactly that situation. They have some Java projects, they want to work them, be mapped with a class-path container. They have other projects, they don't want us to touch them, so they check in the .settings file and they're all good. Okay. So looking at the task view, here we give you some options to filter and sort. So is everybody familiar with the concept of task selectors and project tasks? Okay. Okay, I see some shaking heads. That's enough to explain it then. So when you're on the command line and you just say Gradle, let me go here. I go to the command line and I say Gradle build. It's gonna, what is it gonna do? It's gonna call build on every project that has a build task, right? Which is different to me saying Gradle build with a colon. Because now I'm using an absolute path saying from the root project, I want to run the build task. Right. Of course, if this has dependencies on tasks from other projects, it will run them as well. But it's not going to run every build task of every project. Right. So, so one is, and when you say Gradle tasks, then you see these task selectors. So it will be a collection of all tasks from this directory and all the subdirectories. So I can assure you there's no task like sign bundles in the super project. It's coming from a sub-project, but it shows up here because these task selectors, they're kind of aggregated from all projects and sub-projects. And we can differentiate that in the UI as well. So here, by default, we just show you the task selectors. That's why we put a little star, a little wildcard, so it happens to each. It's applied to each clean that it finds in this directory or subdirectories. But I could also say, nah, I don't want to show this task selectors. Nothing's left. But as soon as I say, well, show me at least the project tasks, I will now see for each project the tasks of exactly that project. Okay, and I can also show both, of course. And then there's the concept of public and private tasks. Public tasks right now are considered those tasks that have a group defined. Right? So if you look on the command line, you see there are help tasks. Their group is help. All these tasks have the group called help. And then there's this one task called upload update site in group other. And it's in the group other because it doesn't have a group defined. So that would be considered a private task. And most of the time you probably don't want to see private tasks. But if you want to, you can say, show me all tasks, and you will also see the private tasks. They are the ones with a little lock.
Is that like dash all on the command line?
Mm-hmm.
tasks.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And there again, if you say Gradle tasks -- all, it will aggregate all the tasks from this project and the sub-projects, including the private ones. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so you have different options here, how much you want to see that you can decide. But typically, you're good with the task selectors. You can also order. You can say, I want to see the task selectors first and then the project tasks, or not. If you want to adjust these width, you can show the headers, and you can easily say, well, I need more space for my task names, or I need less. And then usually, it's better to just hide it again because it just takes real estate. If you have like a really nested structure, you can also expand it or collapse it at once. So you can say here, like expand or collapse, and it goes and recursively expands or collapse. The collapse is not so hard, but the expand just goes. Well, it's not hard too, but it just does a little more. You can also search or filter. So I can say, well, I'm only interested in all the classes tasks, and it will show you all these classes tasks from all the projects. Right? It's just a standard filter widget that you know from Eclipse. And I can hide it again, and I will see everything again. Okay. By the way, if I adjust the column width, we persist that, so next time you open it, you have the same width again. To finish this off, we can also refresh the tasks. So if I say refresh, it will go and ask Gradle for all the tasks of all the projects again. The last one is I can link the selection. So as I click here on the left-hand side, it's going to select on the right-hand side, and vice versa. I can also select multiple ones, or I can select tasks. Doesn't really matter. It's keeping them in sync. Yes?
Is there any plans of monitoring the Gradles on the file system and updating it?
Yes, exactly. So the question was, is there any plan to monitor changes in Gradle or changes that affect the Gradle model that we need through the tooling API, and detect that and notify? Yes, some work has already been done through the continuous mode, because it has to watch for changes. So I would say some infrastructure is in place, but more needs to happen. And we can also extend that to say, well, what do we even have to watch? It's not just the script files, it's also the Gradle properties in your user home, in your project home, the init scripts. So there's more to watch, and we can slowly extend what we are watching. Let Buildship know through the tooling API, and we can do automatic refreshes, or we can notify the user something has changed. So that's definitely coming, yes.
I assume that will come to IntelliJ as well.
Excuse me?
I assume that will also come to IntelliJ as well.
So the question is, will IntelliJ benefit from that as well? Yes. Once it's in the tooling API, it can be consumed by any IDE, Android Studio, or, well, which is IntelliJ. But it's then up to the caller of the tooling API to make use of it. Okay. Yeah.
Do
So
you also do content completion for Gradle files?
auto completion.
Yes.
Right now we don't. Yes. That's why I said explicitly the focus is on the Gradle user right now. And tackling the Gradle build master will come as well. Yes. Okay. One thing at a time. Yes, we can also open the build script, of course. So I can right-click on a node, on a project node. I can say open Gradle build script, and I'll see the script. If I have Groovy plugins enabled, I get a bit more support. And they just upgraded the Groovy Eclipse plugin recently, Andy Clement from Pivotal. So it works again with Eclipse Mars, because it was broken in some milestone. I don't remember which one. So you get a bit more support, right? So that's basically it about the task view. So we can see tasks, we can filter tasks, we can sort tasks, and we can open the build script for a given project. Okay, so the interesting stuff, we want to run tasks. Okay. We can just press enter, we can double click, or we can right click and say run Gradle tasks. If we select multiple ones, that works as well, and we'll execute them in the order that you specified them, because calling Gradle clean build is not the same as calling build clean. Right. So I can say clean build, press enter, and we can see it running. Okay.
Is there a visual indication about which came first, which you clicked first?
Yeah. that came up. So the question is there any visual indication in which order I selected them? No, but we have this kind of I would say on the to-do list. It's not the highest priority, but yes, we have some idea about just having a little number that tells you in which order to do it. What you can always do is you can open an existing run configuration and you can say, oh, no, this was wrong. Let me do this for whatever reason. Let me do it the other way. Oops. Do it the other way around. Right? So here you're kind of free text. You can enter whatever you want to. So this is the run configuration. And as I mentioned before in the keynote, you can customize these settings if you had to. If you don't, it's using the same settings that you use during the import. So if you say use the wrapper during the import, it's going to use the wrapper for running all the tasks by default. But if you want to use something else just for that one task, yeah, go ahead, use 2.0. That's fine. You can also create run configurations right from here, from this framework, this run configuration framework. You can just create
I have a question.
a new one.
I run one single task very frequently. I have to run it, I don't know, every 5 minutes.
Mhm.
How I can run it shorter with fewer clicks?
Yes, so what you can do right now is you can just, like in Eclipse in general, it will show up here. So you just press this button. What we want to do, I'm just not sure yet exactly how to, is some kind of favorite view that you can say, okay, this kind of run configuration, you might have 2 different ones. I want to run it right away. I mean, as long as you have one, that's the way to do it. You just press the button there. But if you had 3 that you switch between, you want to probably have a different view where you say, I want to run this one, or this one. But that's not in there.
At least there used to be a hotkey for rerunning the last run that you just did. So if you're running the same thing over and over again, I think there's
Okay.
a keyboard shortcut.
Yeah, so if there is one to run the most recent one in Eclipse, you can reuse that because we're just integrating into that run configuration framework. I don't know the shortcut, but I'm sure there are Eclipse experts in here that would know. Yes, then as I mentioned, or as I showed before, when you run tasks, we see the output in the console. That's here. We also show at the top what exactly are we using. We're not querying the Gradle build again to say what is the exact version, but we're kind of telling you what is the configuration that you have in the run configuration, these different attributes. We're showing them again here to give you a bit of a better context of what is actually running. Also, the name of the process is here. You see what tasks are run and where it's run. So this is very consistent with how Eclipse does it when you start a new Eclipse instance, for example. So we try to be there as consistent as possible. You can, of course, then navigate between these different consoles. It's just totally integrated with the other consoles. So let me run it again. And what you can also see here in the console is I can stop it. So I can stop that build because cancellation is enabled in this version. And now we see build got canceled. And that's it. We can also close this page, or we can just close all Gradle consoles. That's all. Just the way you know it from Eclipse, we try to be as consistent with what's already there. Yep. So that basically concludes running run configurations, which leaves us with the executions view. And there's definitely a lot more we can do there, but I think what we have right now is already pretty cool. So as I run this, and maybe for a change I could, no, let's keep it at that. So you can also see as it's running, we're updating the times. So the build's still running, some stuff is done. While it's still running, we update these times in a certain interval. So you see, oh, it's already been running for 19 seconds, but it's still not done. Okay, all this stuff is already done. And as I mentioned in the keynotes, this is a tree. So this kind of is the sum of everything that happens underneath it. So the whole build is already running for 34 seconds. It's probably because I don't have internet and it tries to access the internet, so it has these delays in there. And at some point it will be finished. Right? So you see these durations, and you see them updated live while it's running the build. And then, again, these errors kind of percolate to the top. So the whole build has failed. Though failed is kind of it's a strong word. Just something, one task didn't succeed. We also give you some cues. So you see it's red. When it's okay, it's green. It succeeded in running. Even if it's up to date, it did something. It just decided, well, I don't need to do more. But it did something. That's why we show it in green. And if I have some tests, I think I have one down here. If you skip tests, we show it in gray. And you might have noticed while things are running, they haven't completed, we just show a circle, but we don't fill it. So you can also have some visual indication, oh, this is still running, oh, this has completed successfully, been skipped, or failed. We can again filter. So I can go in here and I say, well, I'm just interested in everything related to init scripts. And well, there's more that matches here. But that's how I can filter as well, like in the tasks view. So again, we try to be also consistent between the different views. We can again collapse and expand, like I mentioned before. So let's take that filter away, that we can say collapse or expand. So if I go here, top, I can just recursively expand all the subnodes. While this is running, let me run. I can also run it here, doesn't matter. I can stop the build. I can do that. And that can take some time sometimes. Just because I click there doesn't mean right away that it's going to stop. Because what happens is Buildship tells through the tooling API, Gradle, please cancel the build. And the build itself tests at certain point in the life cycle, oh, has the cancellation been invoked? And if so, it will say, OK, I'll stop. But if you have one task that just sleeps for 2 minutes, well, then your build is not going to be canceled for 2 minutes because there's no check that can happen. So I can cancel the build, and as soon as I've canceled it, this becomes enabled, and I can rerun it. Right? So while it's running, I cannot rerun another one right here. I could from the top level menu, but not here. Okay. I can also, again, go through these pages. So I can say, OK, I want to go. I have 6 invocations or 7. I want to go to this one, and I see. So we stack them, and you can go through these different executions. What I find pretty useful is sometimes you still want to go to the console because you might see some details there that are just easier to consume there. Hopefully, at some point, you never have to go there again. So I can just click on the console icon. Usually, I can. Maybe I already closed this one. And then it takes me to the console view. If a console exists for that execution, then it will be shown. Right. So I can also navigate this way to the console. And the last one is really about dealing with failures, because that's when it gets interesting. So something went wrong, and you want to know, oh, what went wrong? How can I fix it? So if I go down here again to my, I shouldn't have expanded everything. It's too much running. So let's go to the test task at the very end. You can see what went wrong. I ran a full build. It wasn't just the tooling utils. I ran the full build. OK. So I can say, oh, something went wrong with the test task. Let me show the failures. And I see the stack trace that was reported by Gradle. I see a bit more, like a detailed message. And since something went wrong, I mean, this was it's kind of a cheap implementation, but still, it gives me the test summary showing what went wrong. We only show it if something went wrong, so you cannot see the test summary if everything went fine. Right? Yes? Or, oh, I thought I saw a hand. Seeing ghosts. OK. And the other one is, so some test went wrong, and you want to see what exactly went wrong, and you see the details here. You can also copy to the clipboard. And sometimes you can have multiple failures for a single test or a single task, and then you could navigate through them. So let's say your setup method fails. or no, your tear down method fails and the assertion was also failing, you would have two exceptions or two failures, and you would see both failures here. We talk about failures and not exceptions because at some point we also want to run C++ tests through the tooling API and report progress. And there we don't have like a Java stack trace, so we abstract this to the concept of a failure. Yes, and that basically concludes, and it's exactly 45 minutes, the current state in as much detail as I could remember all the features we put in over the past 8 months of Buildship 1.0. And as you can see, the focus is on the Gradle user, so there is no support here except this new creation wizard or this creation wizard to generate something new. It's just consuming an existing build and executing the build. Right, so the build master will be the focus of a next release. Okay. So a few things that are coming up. This is not a conclusive list, and it's not necessarily in the right order. We'll see how that goes. But we'll give you more insight views. And what I mean by that, there will be a view to show you what plugins have been applied to what projects. Where did that plugin come from a build script or from an external dependency or whatnot. There will be a component view because there's already a component report on the command line, but not to the tooling API yet, so we'll add that. There will be a dependency view because as I showed you, the dependencies are now kind of, it's the transitive closure, so it's not really reflecting anymore what you would see in the Gradle hierarchy. So we'll provide a view that is more similar to the dependencies view that you see on the command line, which says this project has these dependencies, while it's using a different dependencies because of conflict resolution, etc. Test execution, this came up before. We tried to do it, but it just didn't work properly without a clean API in the tooling API which says, I want to run this test. Right? This test method, this test class, this test package. So that is coming very soon, in 2.6 actually. So you will be able to right-click and say, rerun that test. And it will not even say run that method that method, but we have a special object that represents a test, and we can exactly identify what test to run. And the key is, what do you run? Like in Gradle, you run a task. So these test descriptors know from which task they are. So when you say, I want to run this test called validate listeners are not invoked, when calling validate, Gradle on the daemon side will run the right task that includes this test. And if that test task has a test fixture, so depending on other tasks that need to be set up, be called first to do some like web server setup, and then some tear down tasks that need to shut down this web server, that will happen as well. Right? So whatever would happen when you run it from the command line will also happen when you run the test task through the Eclipse Buildship. So this is pretty powerful. Right? So you have some setup code. Right now, what would you do? You would click that task, you would run the test, and you would click the tear down task. You will not have to do this anymore. You will just say, I want to run this test. And Gradle will say, OK, I will figure out what task do I need to run. And then based on the model it has about test dependencies, it knows, oh, OK, to run this task, I first need to run this, this, this. And of course, you also want to run the test even if everything is up to date. Right? Usually, I mean, Gradle is so smart, it says, oh, you don't need to run this because nothing changed. But sometimes you still want to run it because you just like to see green tests. So you should be able to do that. So this is definitely coming. What will also come, and that is related, very related to this, is if you're in your project here, and I think that was also something that Mr. mentioned. If I'm not in a test here, but if I were in a test, that I can right-click on the test and just say run as test. And then Gradle will figure out, oh, you want to run this test method from this test class? Which test task does include that test? Maybe it's even multiple test tasks. And once it knows to which task the test belongs, it knows what to run. Right? If you go through this way, it's determined. Right? But if you just have a method or a class name, it has to do a bit more calculation to figure out, this probably came from here. Probably it should not be a probably, it should be sure to, but it's a bit harder to do. So that will be very powerful to rerun tests and to also then rerun only the broken tests or whatnot. Test debugging, that will be the next step. So let's say you have a failing test and now you want to debug it. Well, if you have to start your web server first and then shut it down again and then debug that test, you're back at square one. So you also want to be able to run a test in debug mode. Tell Gradle, you take care of it. And it will make sure the tasks are properly started and shut down, or starting something and shutting it down. But it will run the test in debug mode. And you will have all the debug facilities in Eclipse to say, here I want to have a breakpoint, there I want to have a breakpoint. And so it feels to you like you're just running in Eclipse, but really it's delegating to Gradle to run the test. Project conversion, I mentioned that seems to be important in the Eclipse world, that you can convert an existing small project to a Gradle project. Task glossary as well. So this is going towards the build master a little bit. So let's say you have a build script, you want to create a new task, and you don't really know how do I spell it, what are all the properties there, and what you do, you go to the DSL, then you realize no, it's not the DSL, I have to go there. So it can be a bit cumbersome unless you know exactly what you want to do. So we will give you some task glossary which will say this task, and you see all the properties, you select the properties, and it will enter all this information into your build script. Right, so it's kind of a low-hanging fruit. And there's much more planned. Also, of course, an integration with what you saw by Hans, this SaaS integration, so with the build receipts, etc. That's all going to come. Okay. So if you're interested in trying it out, you can go to eclipse.org. This is the URL. Everything is there. The link to our GitHub of Buildship, of Tooling Commons, the update site, it's all there. So it's like one place to go. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank a few people that have been involved. So we had Wayne Beaton from the Eclipse Foundation, because we were very late. We got on board in December. It wasn't even 8 months. It was, and so there's a lot of process involved for us to be with Eclipse Mars. We also have a company in Germany, Vogella. They have good Eclipse knowledge that they help us with. And then we have, of course, some Gradle developers that helped us develop this. So with that said, you should now go and get it and try it out and give feedback. There's Boxilla. We have the discuss forum, discussgradle.org. The update site is here. As of June 24th, you can find it in the marketplace. You don't even have to leave Eclipse to download Buildship. So even less reason to leave Eclipse. And as of SR1, it will be part of one of the packages. It's not sure yet, probably the Java package, maybe the JE package. We'll see. But that will be, I think, September or so. And then you don't even have to download it from the marketplace anymore. Right. Yes, so that concludes the current state of Buildship 1.0. And yeah, thank you for your attention and have fun.